Welcome to Growing Bremerton Together with Mayor Patty Lent. My guest today is going to be our fire chief, Al Duke. We'll learn about his life and what he's meant to the city of Bremerton. Stay with us. Welcome to Growing Bremerton Together with Mayor Patty Lent. My guest today is our own fire chief, Al Duke. He's been with the city for 32 years. We're going to learn about his history growing up and how he became such a leader in the fire department. Welcome, Al.
Well, thank you, Mayor, for having me here.
It's a joy. You've been a joy since I've been the mayor. And how many mayors have you actually served with?
6 mayors.
6 mayors, the same as Elaine.
Yeah, she's a little longer than I have.
A little longer. What we wanted to learn about you is you grew up in California. And what part of California? And when you were little, what did you want to be?
So I grew up in Southern California, actually in the Orange County area. So when I went to high school, I could see Magic Mountain. It was, or not Magic Mountain, but Disneyland. It was that close. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I got out of high school. So I actually worked in an operating room for about 5 years in one of the local hospitals as an OR technician. And then I realized that this is kind of boring because they do the same thing. They don't like excitement, and I'd like that a little bit more excitement. So I decided LA City Fire was hiring, so I thought I would apply. So I applied for LA City Fire and as a medic, and so we went and they had Hollywood High School. They did the testing, did the written test there, and when I got done, I go, so are you just doing this today? They go, no, we're doing this for 4 weekends, both Saturday and Sunday, and we have about 10,000 applicants.
Wow.
And I'm thinking,
for the positions they were hiring,
yeah,
10,000?
Yeah, they were hiring 40 people, hopefully 80 people at that time. And I thought, oh, my chances aren't any good. So about 6 months later, they said, yep, you got the position. So I actually started with LA Fire in 1979. Went through their academy. As soon as I was done with the academy, I went right to paramedic school. Went to paramedic school in LA, and I worked actually in LA till 1984. I worked in the South Central area for about 2 years. I worked west of downtown for 2 years as a medic, and then 1 year I just floated around from different stations. Now, LA's a little bit bigger than Bremerton.
A little bit. Tell me how many firefighters and EMTs.
So in LA City at that time, there was 116 stations.
Wow.
They had 3,300 firefighters and 500 paramedics. And their call volume was about 300,000 calls
a year.
And so, a little busy. The station I worked at in South Central had 22 calls a day, mostly shootings, mostly violent calls.
Now we're talking back in the late 70s.
Late 70s,
early 80s, right?
Gang wars were starting to take off then. When I went to the west of downtown, it was mostly elderly people and heart attacks and medical. So I got a cross section of different types of calls and a lot of different calls and a lot of volume of calls. And I decided I didn't want my kids to grow up in LA. But I still have 3 kids that live there. And I still visit them when I have to. And I have one daughter that still lives here, and I have a son that lives in Miami. So they're kind of spread out a little bit.
You get lots of vacations.
Yeah. So I started in 1984, and when I pulled up on the ferry. And I thought, oh, this is a nice ferry ride from Seattle. And I look and I'm going, the waterfront is a parking lot. And it's like, oh, that's, okay.
We used to be a parking lot.
It used to be a parking lot. I thought, that's a waste of waterfront. And for a little while, I'm going, what did I really get into? And what brought me here is I had a friend that I actually worked with in South Central who moved up here a couple of years earlier. And he said, hey, come on up and, take a look at the area. Of course, it was summertime, and it was really nice out. And summers here are just gorgeous. And then he goes, well, you got to apply. There's an opening coming up. And so I did, and didn't get that job. But then I applied for Bremerton, and I did get that job. And when I came...
Who was the fire chief when you applied?
It was an acting fire chief. It was Chet Miggs.
Oh,
Chet Miggs was the acting fire chief at the time. Bill Miggs has actually just gone to South Kitsap and became the fire chief at South Kitsap.
Right.
And actually Chet went back to the fire marshal's office. he became a provisional chief again when they left, and he promoted me to medical officer in 1992. And then again, I was promoted in 95 to assistant chief. And when I was assistant chief, he tried to get me to apply for the position, and I'm not quite ready for that
Not
yet.
ready.
So you know, when I first got here, I kind of wondered, what did I get myself in going from a large department like that had more resources than you could shake a stick at.
Right.
I mean, they had all kinds. They had more people in the fire prevention office than we did in the whole department.
Oh my goodness.
But you know, but it's a big department. There's a lot to do, and I was given the opportunity to evaluate products and to get kids out of paramedic school that haven't done quite so well, and
so they needed a mentor.
They needed a mentor, or they needed to be told, "You're not going to make it as a paramedic."
Right.
So I had those two roles, and back then everything was typewritten.
Yes, I remember those days.
Technology has changed a lot. Everything had to be typewritten in carbon paper and all of those old...
Mimeograph.
Yeah, yep. And so...
I wanted to ask you, when you came up here, weren't there 20 different fire districts?
Yeah, actually when I came here, there was 22 different fire districts. There was almost one on every corner. And it was like, oh, this doesn't make sense either.
And it didn't make sense. I know it took us approximately 20 years for those districts to take and either be integrated or make some sense, so there wasn't so much duplication. You have really seen a lot of changes.
Yeah, like just in right around the Bremerton area, District 9 used to be North Prairie, and it was all volunteer. Rocky Point was a fire district. It was all volunteer. Navy Yard City was a volunteer department. And there was actually a Chico fire department. And mostly the volunteer departments then came into the paid division. So now there's 6 fire departments in the county. 6,
that's quite a lot better than what we used to have. But there are still a few volunteers out by Rocky Point. Are they part of CK?
No, they're part of South Kitsap.
South Kitsap. So they have volunteer firefighters.
They mostly what the volunteers do now, and they have a hard time because they have to come up to the same standard that we do. So it takes a lot of time, their own time, to go through that standard. So, and then by the time they do get there, the paid staff has been there taking care of it or gone. And so what they do, there's really a need for tender operators that operate the big water trucks when there's no hydrants in the area.
Right.
They can be chaplains. So we have 3 volunteer chaplains on our department. So we do have volunteers. There's 3 of them. They can be air operators, so they come and fill our tanks when they need to be refilled again. And then they have rehab units. So when you're at a large event and it's cold and you're working, 4 or 5 hours there, they bring nutrition to you, either water, power bars, and stuff like that. So that's where most of the volunteers that we see now are in those areas.
Something that the audience may not know is that I've been on the advisory board for the Red Cross since 1995. I had no idea how closely you work with the Red Cross. And it's because when you talk about if you're on a fire and you're going to lunch hour and dinner and you're still on that fire, they bring you substance. They'll bring you coats, or they'll let you rest. Has it always been like that with the Red Cross?
I was actually the chairman of the board
of the Red Cross.
And Phyllis Mann said, "Hey Al, I'd like you to come on the board and help us out." And she goes, "I need you to find us a new building," because they were at 6th and Washington in that little house. "And I need you to look at our finances and see what you think."
That little house is still there, right across from the Eagles.
Yep.
It used to have a leak, and I think it still has a leak. So there are some history that people can drive through Bremerton and see some of these things. Yeah. So were you always in the blue building, that first fire, when you first came up here?
Yeah, on Pacific Avenue. That was the first building.
And how did you find that brick building on Pacific for the Red Cross?
It's actually 3, for the Red Cross. Well, Phyllis said, "I need you to do that, but by the way, we have no money." And I looked at the finances and I says, "Your staff, you have too much staff. We can't afford to keep going this way." So we reorganized, and then it took me several years, but we worked with, I can't remember. It was a furniture store that was there. for years where they're at now.
Mm-hmm.
And
It was Marion's interior.
Marion's Interior.
Yes.
And we worked with them, and they gave us at a reasonable price. I can't remember what it was now. And then they used a tax deduction for the rest of it, so we were able to move into that.
That's amazing.
About 3 times as big building, and it didn't leak and didn't have the many issues that the other building had. The other thing that the Red Cross does for us too is they provide housing and clothing for the families that have fires that can't do it, or it's at a time where they haven't contacted their insurance company. So, the first day or two, you're kind of dazed anyway for having a fire in your house. And they'll put them up in a hotel and make sure they have the necessities.
Right, they have
because they're gone.
The Red Cross bags that help them just to get through until they can get their wits about them. Another thing that's interesting is that there was a fire alarm, and during a fire alarm, you have to predict that there's going to be a fire. And so it was a hotel downtown, and the people had to take and be out on the street, and Kitsap Transit. So you have an agreement with Transit. They brought over a warm bus, or warmed up a bus, and all the people were able to at least be warm and sheltered until you could either put out the fire or make sure that there wasn't any.
Yeah, we partner with quite a few different entities. Actually, we have a credit union in our downtown fire station. Connection Credit Union is at our front desk. So we'll partner with many people over the years.
That's something that, again, we think of the fire department, you're just there. You get a 911 call and a dispatch, and you're on your way. Recently, 2 big fires that I know people are aware of the fire, but you were right there on the scene. The Aloha fire, and then, of course, Arnold's, and then the explosion that we had at Motel 6. So as we go back to the Aloha fires, you were instrumental in working with a group of people about making sure that these buildings had fire alarms. And even today, Al, your department gives out free fire alarms. How do you go about making sure that our residents have access to that? Because that's something that I feel not every fire department is that considerate or that outward looking to see that the safety in the community is that important.
So the first part, the Kona Village fire, there was 4 fatalities there. I was actually the acting chief at the time. I haven't accepted the position yet. And 4 individuals died in that fire. And then the other ones that I remember, the Arnold's fire, very big fire. The Motel 6 explosion. No fatalities. We've been lucky in those 2 fires. But then we had a fire on Price Road where 2 young gals passed away. And fire alarms are really important to us. After the Kona Village fire, we actually tried to have retro sprinklers put in, and that was cost prohibitive. But we worked for over a year with the Home Builders Association.
I knew your people.
And we finally we made a matrix and said, if you have these things, you have to sprinkler. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. And the one that comes to mind is the hotel on Kitsap Way, the Baymont end.
Baymont.
They finally sprinklered that building. The other ones, if you have somebody watching, different criteria is that you had a point system that you could put a fire alarm in, and that would be okay. So we worked on that for quite a while, and a lot of places have gotten fire alarms or sprinkler systems. The other thing that we've promoted over the years is smoke detectors. At one point we were putting them in. We got a grant, and we put in, years ago, about 10,000 smoke detectors. We would go house by house, and what we've done now is we've partnered with the Red Cross, and the Red Cross will now come and install.
I think KCR does some of that as well.
They do too.
So we've got a few agencies that know the importance of having any kind of a smoke detection. Boy, that saves lives. Something that's sad, though, is that some people move into a house and they are maybe a low income, and for Christmas the kids get a gift and it requires a battery, and they reach up and take a battery out. Aren't you doing something different in your fire alarms?
We've learned over the first time go around that we did that. We went back to see if they were there, and either they were down or the battery was gone. And it does no use at all that way. But then they would only use the 9-volt batteries, and like you said, they would take the batteries out and put them in a toy, or they started chirping, and they didn't want it to chirp anymore, but which meant the battery was dead. So they just take the battery out and not replace it.
Right.
Well, now I think most smoke detectors come with a 10-year battery, and you can't put them anywhere, and so they last much longer. I was amazed, technology has changed a lot. Mr. Gillespie from the Eagles brought this AED down, an automatic defibrillator, and he goes, I don't know what's wrong with it. Well, it was still in the box. They hadn't used it much, and I could hear some chirping, so the batteries, I'm trying to figure out how to recharge it. So we open it up, and here are 3-volt batteries and an AED, and I couldn't believe it. There was 10 of them, and they were just like batteries that you could buy at a store. They're a little expensive, but it's like, really, for an AED? So we went and got new batteries and put it back in there. We're going to give it back to them.
Our defibrillators have that battery system still?
Ours doesn't. The ones that we have on our rig, over the years, the EKGs become more sophisticated. In the old days when I started, when they put the patches on, you can only look at the heart 3 ways. And you really need to look at it 12 different ways. That's how we can tell if you're having a heart attack. So our new monitors have that capability, but we keep ours has a larger battery, and we keep it charged all the time. So the vehicle's parked in the station, you can see an extension cord coming down to it. It does 2 things. It keeps the engine oil warm, so that when we take off, it's already warm. Saves the life on the vehicle. And then the other one is for all the equipment we have on it, keeps it charged. And so it's ready to go at any time.
That's why when we think about our fire stations, your firefighters and EMTs really do save lives. One time I heard a statistic that there are about 41 fires a year. Is that about an average?
That's about an average, about 41 fires, real fires, where we have to hook to the hydrant, take the hose in the house, and put the fire out. And so that's about an average, about a $2 million loss every year in fire loss that we do. The technology over the years has changed immensely on the medical side. When I first came on, we talked about the EKG. You would run it, you draw your blood, and you take them to the hospital, and then they kind of figure out what's going on. They do an EKG. Now, if you call in a timely manner, if we can get to you in the first hour of when you're having that heart attack, we can take you actually right into the cath lab. So we can prepare, we can do your 12 lead, we can give you certain medications. We're so close, we can't give them all, but we're already started that process, and we've seen where they go into the cath lab, and you can see where the blockage is on the artery in the heart that's causing the problem, and you can see them open up that artery and coming back to life that way. So change that way. We're starting to do that with strokes now. With people that are having strokes, we can give them thrombolytics, and so the medicine is changing. We're always reevaluating what we can do better,
That's great. I do know that. I went on a ride. I went up to have dinner at Station 3, and that's the one on Olympus. In the city of Bremerton, we have 3 stations, and you do the scheduling. And we just got in our budget for next year an assistant fire chief. And I do want to say, as we move through this conversation, that you are retiring.
Yes, I am.
32 years is a long time, but you've got lots of life. Not only is Al giving us what it was like when he first arrived here, but all of the new things. We just passed an $8 million bond. We sold the bond so it buys the new fire trucks that are coming on board. But you just got 2 fantastic EMT, Medic Ones. And tell us what that lift does for the benefit of your firefighters.
So we passed the bond, and there was a number of things that we put on it. One was 2 new fire engines, a ladder truck, because they don't last forever. And then we were going to buy 2 new medic units, and then we started looking at refurbishing, where you just take the box off and you slide a new chassis under it, because that's what really goes bad. And then they kind of refurbished the box, and it saved us about $200,000.
It's amazing.
By just doing that. And so now we have brand new vehicles. Our fleet, I'm trying to get all of the levy things that we promised underway. So next week I'll be taking the new engines and ladder truck to City Council for approval to purchase that. We've already purchased, and they're on the way for the 2 new medic units. We just purchased new air packs. So there's a few more things that are due, but they'll be in process before I leave. So it's like, okay, the new chief
All
doesn't
done.
have to worry about it.
That's
being in
terrific.
process.
You also, while you've been the chief, the city passed a levy, and we were to get a new police station, a new fire station, and a new courthouse. And we remodeled a building for the police station, but you guys got a brand new fire station.
Yeah, the old fire station was actually 3. The first part of it was built in 1931. And we have the drawings for it. The second part was built in the 50s, right after World War II. And then they added the admin offices in 1985. And the walls are 12-inch concrete, so there's no separation. There's just these big concrete walls. And when we evaluated, can we fix this station up opposed to a new one, and came too many issues, asbestos, there's no parking. And so one of the things I didn't want to do when I was chief was build a new fire station. But Carrie talked me into it and said, you really need a new fire station. We put a citizens committee together, and they go, you really need a new fire station. So when we passed that bond in 2005, we passed the bond in 2002. In 2005, we actually opened a new fire station on Park Avenue, which now is 11 years old. Seems like we just built it. And the nice part of it is we haven't changed anything. We did a lot of research before we built it. I went to numerous different departments that built stations. Okay, what did you do that worked? What didn't work? I wanted to know what didn't work, why it didn't work, so we wouldn't make the same mistakes.
So you built it for longevity.
Yes, we did.
I do know, though, when it was built and opened, you didn't have a generator.
No.
Because when I came on board 7 years ago, you gave me a tour. I saw all the things, and you've got some great handymen. You've got great, our firefighters have to live in that facility. And so while they're there for those hours on duty, some of them do the landscaping, some of them do little things around the house, you might say. They've got exercising, they've got training, they've got all kinds of things to keep them alert, but also that they can do on behalf of the city.
The generator was, the building was plumbed for the generator. We just didn't have enough money to put the generator in.
So when did we have enough money? When did we get you a generator?
Well, it was probably 3 or 4 years ago.
2012?
Yeah, somewhere in that time. We got the generator and we got it installed. And so now all our fire stations all have generators, and they all have fuel. So we're self-contained in each of our fire stations now.
That's great. And the reason we have them strategically set is what we did on exercise a few years ago, and it actually was, if there was an earthquake, how would we get our first responders out to the public? We found that, boy, that Warren Avenue Bridge divides the city. And so you can't rely on getting to places where you need to be. So I think that you do have a good plan and strategic. Some are going to get a little facelift. They're going to get a little bit of a new roof, or they're going to get some new living quarters, which always need to happen. You've got a tremendous staff. And I know they're hand-picked. They have to go to academy. It's hard to keep them full, and it's hard to keep the overtime. When you're wearing a uniform and you work 24/7, you can't say, well, shift's over. You have to complete that. So we're aware of that, but we also are aware of you have the best time of response. You provide to our community what I think many of the other districts or authorities would like to have. And with your retirement coming up, you are leaving not just a legacy, but some marvelous things that are there. And we want to thank you. I want to say, though, that during the time that you've worked, there have been 32 mayors, not just for you, but in the city, 115 years, 32 mayors, and only 13 fire chiefs. You guys have longevity. And the 20 years for you as fire chief is amazing. If you had something to tell the audience, perfect world, because another thing that the fire district or the chief does, every 3 years we have to have a evaluation and changes to building codes and fire codes. We see what's happening in new materials, but we see what's going to keep people safer. Like in Oakland, California, that should never have happened. Our fire marshals and our inspectors were careful that we don't have a similar thing happen. And as we talk about these changes, you've invited the home builders, you've invited the realtors, the people that are most affected by these restrictions and requirements. You have them at the table so you can find out if there's any leniency, if you can phase something in, how you make it better for everyone concerned. And I appreciate that specifically.
Thank you.
And so the advice for my audience, if how to stay safe, prevent fires. It's cold winter.
Yeah, especially this time of the year. Make sure your smoke detector works. That's probably the key one. That smoke detector will alert you if there's a problem. The other one is if you're sick, call early. Don't wait. Don't wait and wait. I think it's indigestion. I remember one city council member was at work, this has been years ago, was at work and he had indigestion and he just like, okay, it's just indigestion, I'll try this. He goes home, the indigestion gets worse. And the wife says, you really need to go to the doctor. No. Finally he says, okay, just take me to the ER. And of course he had a heart attack.
Yes.
But he waited, almost 8 hours for that. So the treatment is different when you wait that long to when it first happened. Just call us. We'll come and tell you if you're having a heart attack or not. And if you're not, that's good. But if you are, we can get you to the hospital and get you treatment.
How can people be safe with their Christmas tree?
Make sure it has plenty of water. Make sure there's nothing that could set it on fire. Keep heaters away from it.
Heaters, and if you have a vent, either close the vent or have some kind of a thing that doesn't blow the air and dry it out too fast.
Dry it out even faster. So, but mostly if you keep water in it, it should last. And don't keep it for months.
A few days after Christmas or New Year's, we've got lots of places to deposit the Christmas trees.
The city has a recycling, and you can recycle it for free.
That's right. Just take it. And do you know where those are? The ones at Olympus?
One's at Olympus.
And one is at Oyster Bay?
Oyster Bay, the two public works facilities. You can just drop them off and they will shred them and reuse them.
Terrific. Al, thank you. Thank you for being my guest. Thank you for the service that you've provided for everybody in the city, and even on the outskirts. He's on lots of boards. His name is going to last a lot longer than that 32 years that he's been with us. And it's my pleasure having you as my guest.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, audience, for learning all these new things and some fun things about our fire district, our fire department, and our chief, Al Duke. See you next time.